that now in the second session, I want to focus on the economy and COVID-19, again with two presentations and two discussants. We are now complete, starting immediately with our first presentation. It's about fiscal implication of COVID-19 in Europe, current status and future prospect. Well, when I read this, with let's say with a different view, yesterday, 3 days ago, our tax income estimate came out. It's a revised one, of course. Every country has to revise its budget and the estimates of tax income. So therefore, I'm very much looking forward to this first presentation of Professor Yoo-Duk KANG. The presentation I heard from Germany was, of course, we will have general elections later this year, the 26th of September, and our finance minister is running for chancellor. So therefore, I guess I can learn a lot from your presentation now, Professor KANG. You studied at Sciences Po in Paris. You were a very long time with the Korean Institute for International Economic Policy, and now you are at Sang-Wuk University. We are very much looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
This is really a pleasure to be invited here by JeongHun Foundation. Particularly, I think this seminar is a very precious opportunity for me to address my view on the current status of the European economy and also compare this situation with what we observe here in Korea. I just prepared many statistics and tables and figures to explain what happened in Europe, particularly related to COVID-19, and what the European country tried to respond to this crisis using fiscal measures, and particularly increasing government spending and also the providing many support to household and company. And also, I didn't treat the monetary measure here, but I will mention a little bit also what the European Central Bank has done to respond to COVID-19. I organized my presentation into 4 parts, but I think for first one, COVID-19 and Europe, the previous presentation done by my colleague, they did already present some part of this statistics. So I will skip a little bit for part 1, and then I will show what is economic situation in Europe, focus on the GDP growth rate for the last year, this year, and year to come. And also for part 3, I will elaborate what was the fiscal response done by the EU member states to stop hold back the spread of the pandemic in Europe. And also for last part, I will try to provide a personal assessment, which is not exact, but I will try to argue my the expectation on what happened in Europe, particularly related to fiscal rule in Europe and European integration. For COVID-19, this is the most updated data because I was a little bit late to present my presentation period to organizer. So this is the last data on I think Monday this week, and the US is the compound cases of COVID-19 was most immersed in US, followed by India and Brazil. But if we check the European country, we can find many European countries regarded as the most affected country by COVID-19. And when we arrange the EU member countries, actually which include Russia as well, because Russia is located in Europe. France is the most affected country in terms of COVID-19, followed by Russia, UK, Italy, Spain, and Germany. Actually, the large countries which have a big number of population are more affected than small economies. But what is interesting is the I think that yes here the deaths per 1 million people. When we reorganize the number of ranking, I mean the ranking of the country according to deaths per 1 million population, actually the high-ranked countries are mostly Central and Eastern European economy, starting from Hungary, Czech Republic, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and so on. I think it's a little bit premature to conclude that this kind of the death rate is depending on the capacity to deal with the public health crisis, but that ranking provides us the kind of vague idea that the number of victims depends on the income level of each country and capacity of capacity and health infrastructure in each member state. In that reason, I guess there will be much more need to the fiscal measures and also some fiscal measure to the hold back the spread of COVID-19. And then this is the flow. This is the development of COVID-19 in the world, and this is Europe. I think this period we call it I think this period we call it first wave of COVID-19, and then there was a second wave, and we are in the middle of. Actually, we are ending a third wave of COVID-19 in Europe. The declining number of confirmed cases in Europe is highly related to lockdown and shutdown measures in Europe, and also increasing number of vaccination in Europe. I will skip this one, and that figures. Okay, that figure provides a very interesting comparison between EU member states over last 18 months. The Oxford University and some research institute in UK have developed a kind of index which is called COVID-19 Stringency Index. It synthesizes all measure taken by each government on this is a kind of aggregation of those stringent measures taken by the government, and I provide just one number to compare the development on time series and development between our countries. You can clearly find that 4 countries in Europe, Germany, Italy, France, and UK, they increased the level of stringency. I mean, they imposed the lockdown and shutdown and all the top measures for social distancing in March 2020, because that was the very moment that the COVID-19 started to spread over the Europe. And then they maintained that measure until middle of 2020, I mean the summer of 2020, and then they lowered down their level of social distancing because the number of confirmed cases are lowered, and they realized there is another measure to deal with the spread of COVID-19 using new technology and so on. And then when there is the second and third wave of the COVID-19, those governments once again they strengthen stringent level of their measure for limiting the spread of COVID-19. If we compare this development of COVID-19 for each country, you can largely find that the level of stringency of government measure overlap with the level of confirmed cases. Level of confirmed cases in each country. So according to how many people newly confirmed every day, the government increased its level of stringency measures, so they relax a little bit, and so that depends on the actual situation. What is the optimistic, particularly for the UK, we found that the number of confirmed cases in UK dropped dramatically over the last 2 months. many people said that that's the effect of increasing vaccination in UK. We will see a little bit later, but the UK is most advanced in terms of vaccination rate in Europe. That's the number of yearly vaccine distributed by manufacturer to each country. It has been increased over the last 3-4 months, but the level is a little bit different between members. For example, the country like where is UK? Yes. Some countries have a very good level of distribution because they have capacity to produce, but some countries they are still lack of average. And then when we compare level of vaccination, I tried to change that Korean to English, but it didn't work. But I think we can understand largely. That is 53.1%, and that is a less number of how many people vaccinated in UK. So over half of British people they are vaccinated. But if we look at the number of Korea, it's 7%. So I'm not sure, is there anybody who are vaccinated? Nobody. So actually, our composition shows that the low level of vaccination in Korea, but I don't think it's a policy failure. Actually, the level of vaccination reflects the social need of each country. So UK have more exposed to the spread of COVID-19. This is why UK government precipitate to vaccinate a large number of people, while in Korea, the social distancing was much more effective. It's why we are a little late to the vaccination. Of course, there's some countries who have manufacturing capacity in producing a vaccine. It's more that they have the high vaccination rate. When we compare UK with France or Germany, vaccination rate in Germany was 32%, and that of France is 26%. So we can compare the difference between those countries. Now we look at the economic situation in Europe. That figure shows that the GDP growth rate of 4 large economies, of Germany, France, Italy, and UK, and also component of GDP. What is common in 4 figures is that in 2020 there was the dramatic decline in economic growth rate, and all countries reached to -8% or 9% of GDP contraction in 2020. When we just focus on the component of GDP, we can clearly find out that the sky color it represents the private consumption. That is, private consumption contracted dramatically over last 18 months. And this is due to COVID-19, of course, but what is particular in COVID-19 crisis is that's the crisis for demand and supply at the same time. When we recall the global finance crisis in 2008, basically it was demand driving crisis. The economic crisis took place in financial sector, financial and real estate sectors, and that created a huge negative effect on the consumption, domestic demand of each country, and then that crisis just spread to another developing country. That was consequence in global finance crisis, and there was clearly demand side crisis. But in case of COVID-19, it's demand side crisis because consumption declined dramatically, but it is also supply side crisis due to social distancing and also the spread of pandemic. It was impossible to produce something in normal way, and as we know, the global value chain was interrupted during the crisis. When China imposed lockdown in February and March 2020, we all experienced that the factory in Korea, even factory in US, they couldn't operate in normal way. In that way, the global supply chain was interrupted during the crisis. That's why I call this is supply side crisis. But the problem is, in case of demand side crisis, we know what we have to do. There are many measures that we mastered during a previous crisis. The first option is just low key interest rate and provide more liquidity to financial market, and also increase government spending to stimulate economic activity. That's typical manual and typical and standard measures to deal with demand side crisis. But in case of supply side crisis, we have no answer. We have no particular measures because all kind of supply side effect is related to technology and productivity, and also the management of global supply chain. So it's why this crisis is much more severe than previous crisis that we experienced. Many economists expect that economic activity rebound in 2021, but that depends on many factors, particularly the vaccination of each country, and given that each country are very independent each other through trade and investment and financial linkage, as well as the human exchange and the exchange of people. We are not sure economic activity rebound this year with certainty or not. During that crisis, of course, the economic, in 2020, there was almost the first time that even emerging economy experienced the minus growth rate. And then if we look at the European country, and we found that most of the country experienced the minus 8%, 9%. Even some countries such as Spain and Italy, they experienced more than 10% of minus growth rate over last years. And according to the projection of the European Commission, that is the forecast done by November last year. In 2020, GDP growth rate of those countries all minus. That there's no exception. Even 2008 global financial crisis, there was a few number of countries in Europe who experienced positive growth rate, just like Poland. But in case of the COVID-19, it's really symmetric shock, which affect every country. There's no single exception. And then this is a itinerary and the growth path of the global economy, and I think the European economic growth path is just the same. This is the normal pace, and in 2020-21, economy was scheduled to increase in that way, but due to COVID-19, there was a drop in growth rate, and then it should be rebound in that way. But if there is the second wave and third wave of COVID-19, it will drop once again, and if there is a fourth wave, it drop once again. But the problem is, once the economy drop in that way, we call it a structural break. And with structural break, it's very hard to reach out the previous growth path. If we imagine the growth path go in that way, in the previous experience tell us that this kind of the rebounding is very exceptional, and we know that the European country experienced severe economic crisis in 2008 and also 2011 and 2012. We all remember what happened in Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy almost 10 years ago. As far as I know, only single country who was successful going back to previous growth path was Ireland. Except Ireland, all countries, Spain, Greece, Italy, and they experienced lost 10 years over last 10 years in terms of economic growth rate. Now let's look at the fiscal response. Fiscal response of each country depends on the capacity of public finance of each country. If one country, let's say there's one country in Africa or Southeast Asia which have that problem, in that case, it's very hard to provide the public money in order to support economic activity during crisis. So some country, particularly a developing country here, they injected almost 10% of their GDP to support economic activity, starting from the US and Canada, and many countries in Europe, and also Japan. But we can find clearly large number of developing countries, they didn't have proper the fiscal space to support economic activity during the crisis. So overall, the stimulus measure done by the country is very heterogeneous according to the status of each country. And then if we look at how much each country injected public money into real economy, it's very different country by country. For advanced economy here, they almost injected more than 50% of their GDP into economy to support economic activity. When we add, actually those were additional spending and foregone revenue, it is recorded as fiscal deficit. But in case of equity loan and guarantees, that's not spending. Actually, the government just provide guarantee on any kind of credit of financial institution and companies. So that's not real spending. But when that situation happened, probably it's the government who have to pay for all guarantee and loan and equity. But anyway, it depends on the situation of each country. And in case of Italy, it's dramatic because the public fiscal burden of Italy due to COVID-19 was 35% of their GDP. That's a huge amount. We know that the fiscal deficit level of each EU member country should be 3% of GDP. So actually, that's 10 years of the fiscal deficit that Italy have to take care of. And then this is for the emerging market, which including China as well. And this is for the low income, least developing country. And we clearly compare that the scale is here up to 5.5, but in case of the advanced economy is 40. So we can clearly conclude that most of the least developed countries, they couldn't deal with this crisis with public money because their fiscal capacity was very limited. As a result, when we look at EU member states, they have a huge fiscal deficit right here. They have huge fiscal deficit just right here, and all minus. As we know, the Stability and Growth Pact of the EU defined that each member of fiscal deficit of each member state should be below 3% of GDP. But if you get a country like Italy, that's more than 10%. So that's unsupportable level. But the European Commission and also the Council of the EU agreed to activate the general escape clause of the fiscal regulation. So I think the last year EU just recommend its member states just forget fiscal rule. This time it's more important to save economy and save people, and just you don't need to stick to your fiscal rule of 3%. I think this kind of exception will continue this year. Maybe EU try to rolling back that exception, the escape clause next year. But as a result, public debt, government debt increasing dramatically. When you compare compare the country like Greece, that level of Greece was 100% in terms of GDP in the early 2000, but it increased more than 200%. And that of Italy, it was around 100%, but it's 100, almost 160%. In Korea, we have 40% of that in terms of GDP, but we probably remember that there was huge the debate among a policymaker. Do we have to provide income support to such people or not? We all remember, and main argument is we have to take care about our public debt, right? But when we compare those countries with Korea, they have 5 or 6 times more public debt in terms of GDP. So their situation is most in negative side, they have too much government debt. In positive side, the government voluntarily take care of people using their fiscal capacity. And then this figures is this one is the same figure, but I just want to focus on debt development. That is debt to GDP ratio. Debt to GDP ratio increased for advanced economy dramatically from 2019 to 2020 because fiscal support was massive during that period. But what is interesting is interest expense. When we have public debt, when government have public debt, government have to pay interest, right? When we borrow money from the bank, we have to pay interest. That interest represent, for example, for Italy, 5% of GDP. So that's a huge part. But even though the debt to GDP ratio increased, the burden of interest expense declined, and the main reason is expansionary monetary measure done by European Central Bank. Right after the crisis, European Central Bank lowered key interest rate, not lower. The key interest rate in European Central Bank is almost zero, so it was impossible to lower anymore. But the ECB increased its non-conventional measure to provide liquidity to public in financial sectors. And this kind of massive intervention of central bank allowed to lower overall interest rate in financial market. So for the government, it was not very hard to emit the obligation, the government debt to borrow money from the financial market. So this is, I think that is the action that is largely due to the action by central banks such as European Central Bank and Federal Reserve. But the consequence is, in my opinion, for European Central Bank, there is a strong regulation on prohibit of the monetary financing. Monetary financing means the government borrow money from central bank. This is a typical way of quantitative easing in case of Federal Reserve and also Bank of England. But for European Central Bank, it was completely prohibited because ECB was based on German Bundesbank. Bundesbank prohibited this kind of monetary financing in very strict measures. But in case of COVID-19 crisis, ECB just forget this kind of obligation, and ECB just add each government in order to lower down the fiscal burden. So there is a kind of mix between monetary policy and fiscal policy. And that is just my opinion, and I will try to argue a little bit this one later. And then, so this is a data of IMF, but IMF data provide the same. They have large fiscal deficit for year 2020 and 2021, and as a result, the debt level has been increasing in a dramatic way in most of the European countries. Now I'm come to the fiscal implication. Let me look at that figure. This is overall very long overall the figure on government debt and long-term interest rate over more than 100 years. The government debt level increased here dramatically because there was Second World War. The government had to get money from the financial market, and they increased the fiscal spending to provide the military equipment and so on. After war, level of public debt dropped dramatically, and then it increased, particularly during 2008, the global financial crisis. Government debt level increased dramatically, and then it declined a little bit, and then it increased dramatically once again. So the government debt level of each country is almost those of during Second World War. So we have high debt. We are living a high debt period, but the long-term interest rate declined dramatically. One of the reasons is that's the central bank who provide massive the liquidity to the finance market. I think some of us invest in stock market and even the coin. You know what is coin, right? Over the last the April 2020, there was the liquid bottom of stock market price, but later it increased dramatically, and many people got some money investing. And you probably remember that I think it's 4th May, just 10 days ago, Janet Yellen, she's a finance minister, secretary of the treasury in the US, and she was the president of the Federal Reserve. She just said it's necessary to deal with inflation. This means central bank should decrease key interest, and that create a panic in the stock market. I think that kind of the panic, not panic, but when Federal Reserve start to increase key interest rate and deal with inflation, that create huge money flow from emerging market to developed countries, particularly in the US, because the global capital move according to different interest rate over different countries. This kind of thing happened this year, I think. And then this shows that government debt forecast for France, Italy, and Spain, and Germany. When we look at the Germany first, Germany will the decrease. I mean, reduce its public debt over next 10 years, and we all think that Germany will be successful in this effort. But because their debt level is not so big compared to the Italy or France. But in case of France, Italy, they will have a little bit more hard time, and Spain, even their debt level will increase over the next 10 years. The consequence is during 2020 and 2021, all those economies, they just put money in financial market in order to save the country. That's normal, and there's no people who criticize. But as the vaccination rate increase and the COVID-19 will become more stable and controllable, those countries have to initiate fiscal consolidation. Fiscal consolidation means they have to increase tax rate, or they have to cut government spending in order to lower fiscal deficit and government debt level. But providing something to people, that's very easy. When government provide us with any kind of the subsidy, we are happy, and even personally I received and we purchased the beef the last years. But when government stopped spending and reverse its fiscal policy toward increasing tax rate, that's not easy. That would be a tough decision for the government. I think this kind of situation will happen in Europe and from next year. And also, fiscal consolidation effort is different between countries. For Germany, I think it's relatively easier than one country. But the countries like Italy and Spain, they will have a much more tough moment than Germany. And the problem is they all use the same currency, euro. The dealing with COVID-19 is very simple in the sense that it's symmetrical. All countries have the same situation, so there's no single country who opposed to increasing government spending. All agree. But for fiscal consolidation, the perspective of each government is so different. For example, German government insists that at euro level, euro area level, it's necessary to impose much tougher fiscal rule, fiscal consolidation, while the government in Italy, government in France and Spain, they have a different voice. And when those countries, people of those countries, Italy and Spain, feel, our opinion is ignored by the European Commission. Actually, that's the moment that Euroscepticism comes out, and there's many policymakers and politicians who use this kind of public dissatisfaction as their political asset. So probably 2022, 2023, Euro area and European Union will have a difficult moment, not only in terms of fiscal consolidation, but on a future destination of Europe. It's obvious that the people of Italy, they propose to create more fiscal integrated such as Eurobond, but I'm not sure the other part of the European country will agree or not. So this kind of diverging perspective at post-COVID-19 era will be a kind of observation point for the European integration. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you for inviting me for this event. I'm Bong-chul KIM from Hamburg University of Foreign Studies. My major is law, especially trade law and economic law. But today, I really want to avoid to talk about the details of the legal point of view, but just briefly speaking about the legal field. Yes. The previous presenter, Professor Kang, talked about the economic point of view regarding the COVID-19. So I don't want to talk about the details on the COVID-19 and the international economy, but we have to just pick up the one point. In the future, we will recover and our economy after the COVID-19. Then I believe that the international society should be back to the normal trend. However, we have to say that even though our economy, international economy, should be back to the normal, but their dimension is quite different from the previous days. So we can say that yes, international economy or international trade should be show a bit different dimension. So I want to focus on that point. What should make us those kind of different economic and trade environment? We have to respond to this new economic and trade environment, and we have to support these kind of things. And then the law, international law, or even domestic laws must support these new economic and trade environment. According to the WTO, the international economy or world trade to be back to normal or recovered from maybe later this year or next year. Yes, the statistical data is to explain these things, but let's just skip these things. Yes, regarding the COVID-19 situation, we have some possible trade issues like that. For example, global transportation systems or the distribution of vaccines or medical products, something like that, be a very important trade issue. Sometimes some countries, they try to restrict the export of the vaccines or related products. Yes, recently, some societies, they have some problem related to the fake medicine or fake vaccine, something like that. It is the international criminal thing. And also, international society must control this point. Trade facilitation research and the world's trade tourism, yes. This is also related to the international economy regarding COVID-19. Other point is that intellectual property issues. Yeah. When we want to make the vaccine or a medical product, we have to consider the intellectual property issues. Restrictions of free movement of service or natural person is also important point to the economic or trade issue regarding COVID-19. Yes, many countries, they maybe restrict the movement of natural person. Therefore, we cannot receive the good service from natural person sometimes. So it is also important point regarding trade or economic issues. Standard in the trade development facility and the classification for COVID-19 related products and the other things. Yes, of course, we have many more examples regarding the economic or trade issues on the COVID-19 situation. Yeah, in the international society, many international organizations, institutions, or NGOs, or governmental branches, they are struggling to these serious situation. So for example, I just write here some international organizations regarding the issues which I previously explained. So UNCTAD from the United Nations, ILO regarding the labor issues. Yeah. So many international organizations, the governmental branches, they are working together, but they are struggling still. Yeah, the situation. In the trade field, WTO, they are consider many trade measures regarding COVID-19 issues. Sanitary issues. Many member countries of WTO system, they are making the harder restrictions regarding the sanitary measures, technical barriers, intellectual property, of course. Public health, it is one of the cause of the trade measures. Quantitative restrictions of products and the public procurement is is directly related to the especially vaccine program. Support trade facilitation, fair competition regulations. They are also related to the measures, trade measure in the WTO system. So WTO, they are still struggling to these kind of measures by the member countries. Sometimes members, they are trying to do some measures regarding the trade issues, but sometimes it can be related to the unfair activity in the trade issue. So it can be related to the legal dispute, the international trade or economic stage. Okay, let's move on to the Korea-Europe relations. Under the COVID-19 situation, I believe that the international economic laws have some important roles to overcome this situation. Yes, we have briefly watched the issues and the trade measures. So it's time to think about the role of international economic law to overcome this situation. The basic role of international economic law is to make better economic situation or better trade environment. So the multinational trade system or economic system, which is WTO, they are always trying to make better rules for that goal. But in the COVID-19 pandemic situation, it's very extraordinary situation. Therefore, we are all together embarrassed in this situation. Yes, more than 1 year, for a long time, yes. WTO and the other international economic related organizations, they all work together, and sometimes they try to make their own solution to make better solution for this pandemic situation. So it's time to rethinking the role of international economic law. It's not just about the economic benefit or profit for the business or the certain countries. It's for the human beings altogether. Or sometimes it is related to the existence of human beings. So even if the name of the law is economic law, but it's time to think about the human being. Okay, just brief explanation of the WTO rules. From the GATT 1994, which was amended by the GATT 1947, many WTO laws are related to the trade measures and the COVID-19 issue. So they are just the examples of the point. Just quickly skip this. Yes. In the international stage, yes, I explained the WTO rules, but we have many different types of international law, economic law. So I just distinguished by 3 sections, considering the Korea-EU relationship. Firstly, European Union and Korea all together the member of WTO system. So 2 partners must follow the general trade or economic law of WTO and many other multinational general economic rules. However, yes, we have bilateral FTA. So the free trade agreement, the bilateral free trade agreement between European Union and Korea, is the special law rules for the regulation of their trade. So FTA became one of the major rules to regulate or control or sometimes support their trade issues. Recently, many countries, they are trying to regulate their trade volumes not just by the WTO rules, but by the FTA or other types of preferential economic law. For example, Korea, regarding the trade relationship with European Union, for example, Germany, if Korean businessmen want to import some product from Germany, yes, they must consider firstly not just the WTO rule, but the FTA rule, of course, because it is the special rule. So this rule is the firstly applied, then WTO rule. So recently, a preferential economic law is very important for the partner countries. Then the multinational general economic law, such as WTO rules, should be a second, kind of background of international economy. The third rule is, Korea and the one member of European Union can make their own bilateral agreement. For example, Korea and Poland. Poland is the member countries of the European Union. Yes, two countries, they are managing the bilateral agreement relationship, such as the Korea and Poland working holiday program agreement. Yes, of course, Poland, the member countries of European Union, they must follow the internal European Union law. So under the umbrella of the European Union law, Poland can make their own bilateral agreement with Korea. It may make some variation of their trade economic relationship. So I want to say that Korea and the European Union, and Korea or the member of European Union, they have the three or multi-layered legal system, something like that. So those kind of international economic law must do something for these new issues like this. Yes. Sometimes the international trade or economic law can be used for the non-economic issues. Sometimes. If the non-economic issues are related to their economic issue, then international economic law can be used partially applied to the non-economic issues. So sometimes you can see the example like that. So to respond to the pandemic situation, yes, we have to find out the solution from our international economic law for the two partners. Yes, using the WTO rules or FTA or bilateral agreement. But we have to consider several core points. Harmonization among the related international laws, or combination of international laws and domestic rules. It is difficult job, but it is unavoidable job. Harmonizing among the international law, we have many kind of international law. International economic law is just one part of international law field. So when we use international economic law, we have to consider other parts of whole international law. And also, in the field of international economic law, we have to consider other functions and roles and rules of international economic law. Here, I want to talk about the one concept, sustainability. To harmonize the many international economic laws or international laws, we can use the concept sustainability. This is the very trendy factor in the international law field. So we know that the sustainability concept. So SDG is the good example by the United Nations. WTO, yes, for example, they are trying to make their own concept regarding sustainable trade and economy. Under that concept, WTO system, they are doing many jobs for developing country, for the eco-friendly work, and using the IT strategy, something like that. Let's focus on the chapter 13 of the European Union FTA. Luckily, we have good example in these relationship. Korea-EU FTA, they have chapter 13, which name is Trade and Sustainable Development. Here is the provisions of this chapter. This is very special chapters or provision in the field of free trade agreement. There are more than 500 FTAs in the international society, but only European Union, they started use these concepts regarding their FTA partners. And also, Korea-EU FTA, it is the first example to use this concept. After the 2010, I think, yeah, after the Korea-EU FTA, European Union, they always try to apply this concept to their FTA partners. So Singapore, European Union Singapore FTA, European Union Japan EPA, and European Union Vietnam FTA. These FTAs all together, they have these chapters. So I want to say that this is the kind of special brand of European Union regarding their FTA. So let's come back to the Korea-EU relationship. To overcome the COVID-19 situation between two partners, we can use these concepts, sustainability and trade development issue. Yes, of course, we can make the very detailed examples and samples, but we can start from that concept for making detailed solution. This is another point, combination of international law and the domestic rules. I said that many international law are very different, and sometimes it may make the source of international dispute. Sometimes certain actions or measures by certain countries based on their own domestic rules will make the international dispute. So when we want to make the solution, we have to consider that point as well. Yeah, the international standard and domestic rules are based on the different mechanisms. So we have to consider that point and we have to make some flexibility of international economic law. For example, international economic law in the European Union for the single market, this may make some unstable situation. Therefore, we have to make some solution by the combination of domestic rules and the international economic laws. Well, I don't know what happens here. Yeah. But we have to think another point. European Union, they have their own law, and also the member states, 27 member states, they have their own domestic rule. Of course, under the concept of European Union law, the domestic rules of the member states must be harmonized with the whole European Union law. So we have to consider that point. Korean side have to understand the system. For example, this is the example Schengen Agreement for the regulation of the movement of natural persons in the European area. They have international law, but under the COVID-19 situation, many domestic rules make different activities, restriction, control of free movement. So one day in the future, I believe that the power of Schengen Agreement should be back to normal. Yeah, for the service area, for the tourism, for the transportation of people and product. Yes, Schengen Agreement is needed. So in the near future, 100% Schengen Agreement power to be back. But in those days, we have to consider the different situation of each partner. Yeah, this is the last slide. Homework for the partner. We have to find out the common point for the combination of international economic laws and domestic rules. And then I believe that there is the possible point, the source of possible point from the concept of trade, sustainability and trade. And this is the example, internal digital market on trade, the pandemic related issues can be a good solution point. We can make some cooperation job in this sector, and we can recover our economy based on our domestic rules and international economic rules using this field. European area, yes, they have the European digital single policy and laws, and Korean side, yes, as we know, Korea, they are very, addicted to the e-business, something like that. So we can make the combination. To do that, the two sides must make the combination of their own international economic laws and domestic rules. That is the catchphrase of our university. Come to hopes with the world. Is the order of our president. Thank you very much.
We are now coming to a discussion, and I wanted to kindly request you if we could allow until the end of our roundtable today, let's say 10 more minutes, 10 to 15 more minutes, because it's really, every minute is a precious minute here. And of course, it's a good sign that we are under time pressure. So if you agree, we extend it a little bit. Of course, I asked you for a very compact discussion, but after that, we should also have the opportunity to discuss a little bit. So we have another long-distance traveler with us, Professor Sang-Wuk AHN, who joined us from the Bong-chul KIM University, National University in Busan. He he has been in the position, he is, if I see it correctly, for 10 years now. So we are looking forward to your discussion and contribution. Thank you.
To this honorable discussions. So I'd like to express my gratitude to head of Friedrich Naumann Foundation Korea Office, Dr. Christian TAAKS, and also President of the Korean Society of Contemporary European Studies, Professor Dr. Lee. So now I think so we are under high pressure. I finished within 3 minutes, my comments. I think it will be better for the organizer. So thank you for so timely and also very interesting presentation from Professor Dr. Yoo-Duk KANG and also Professor Dr. Bong-chul KIM. So this is very timely presentation about economic change with COVID-19 impact and also international law. For example, transition with COVID-19 between EU and Korea. Yes. So I don't believe we will have some the real Q&A. Maybe the real Q&A we can develop during our dinner time. I will do just my comment on both of presentations. So this COVID-19 case actually, this is not unprecedented pandemic case. We have got already this case 100 years ago. With Spanish flu, we have around 20 million victims of deaths at the time, and also we have got the so-called V-type economic recovery too, and then we have used economic stimulus policy, and also finally it became very dangerous at the last moment, and it returned back to us with Great Depressions, and we have to remember that. So that's why I'm really worrying about stimulative policy of the European Union. During nowadays, and also for the comments my comments on the presentation of Professor Bong-chul KIM. Actually, European Korea EU FTA. This sustainable development chapter is important. However, now this is the point of the dispute between Korea and European Union, especially the labor chapter. Article 13.4. That's why I think maybe this kind of sustainable development chapter can be obstacle for European Union in the future to extend their trade agreement with the other trading partners. That is the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very compact comment. All the others are cordially invited also to, before we can go back to the two presenters, if you have further comments or questions, please do not hesitate to ask. After Professor JeongHun HAN from Seoul National University, we are expecting your comment.
Okay, thank you for inviting here. I really appreciate Professor Kim for holding this kind of event under this difficulty and very stressful situations. And also very thanks to the Christian TAAKS, head of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, and your cooperation with the EU study groups. And before moving on to my comments, I have to confess that because I'm not the expert on the economics and international law, so maybe my comments might not be correct. And if it is not correct, then please forgive me and just ignore my comments. And yeah, I'm gonna start from the discussions about the second paper because I am the designated discussant for the second paper. So the author, the Professor Kim Bong-chul, argues that the domestic and international law should help support the new trade environment after the COVID-19. That would be the main themes of his presentation. But I actually try to say that what would be the new trade environment after the COVID-19? So because you did not define the new situations after COVID-19, that actually make it problematic for us to understand what we have to do and what kind of operations the domestic levels and international levels should happen. In particular, like some kind of social conditions produced by the COVID-19, there will not be just the static conditions, because the politicians have to respond to that kind of changing situations. So that actually implies that we have to know how the EU understand the COVID-19 situations and how the Korean government or Korean society understand the COVID-19 situation. So after the definition of the new environment, new trade environment of the COVID-19 situations, we have to also know both sides of the perspectives, how to deal with the COVID-19, post-COVID-19 situations. But in the presentations, I did not find any descriptions or definitions of new trade environment. That would make me hard to understand the whole things. And also for example, in the following argument, Professor Kim just said that we have to follow the WTO agreement, and also we have to consider some of the bilateral relationship with the EU and the EU-Korea FTA that might be work together to deal with the post-COVID-19 situations. But as you know, recently the European Parliament passed the laws about the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and that actually strongly related to the WTO issues. The carbon tax provided by the European Union could be the violation of the WTO agreement. So EU takes some kind of very cautious approach to avoid that kind of violations. And then the United States actually takes stance to support that kind of EU's positions. And what we have to do, the Korean government have to follow the cooperation between the EU and America, or we have to speak our stance on the WTO agreement. So to follow the WTO agreement is not consistent with the consistent to improve the bilateral relationship. So it might be just one thing to argue that we have to cooperate and we have to consider the multilateral cooperation in international law and domestic law, but the actual situation might not be so easy. So how to deal with that kind of problems? So that would be one kind of questions. And concerning the Professor Kang's presentation, I have one, because this is not designated discussing paper, so I have one question. You said that the expectation of a rebound of growth rate might not be same as our expectations, previous expectations. That was very interesting because of the COVID-19 causes the economic downfalls, and because of that kind of downfalls, we might not go back to the original track of the economic growth. However, that expectation, when you explain that expectations, you actually said that based on previous experience, the expectations actually make us ready to expect the rebound of the economic growth. What would be the previous experience? This COVID-19 is a kind of pandemic situation, which means that everybody experienced for the first time. So what kind of experience in the past could be the comparable one to this kind of expectations, and how the expectations affect this kind of expectation on economic growth? That would be the one kind of questions. Thank you very much.
One question, Professor Kang. We are always talking about the European Union challenges and time after, but you have very impressively drawn our attention to the differences between the European Union. I mentioned that before, that countries like Italy were very close to state bankruptcy and so on before the crisis started. How do you assess the ability of the EU member states for solidarity, for finding really European solutions which deserve the name European solution and which are not really significantly hindered by single country egoisms. This is my first question. The second, the homework for the EU partners. There's a lot to do. Do you think your assessment of the European situation, do we have the sufficient mechanisms to do this homework, or will we need new dynamics for the challenges to come? Thank you very much.
And as an extension to the Professor Han comment regarding sustainability of the banks, I'm really curious that this is unprecedented crisis. So how long do you expect this current fiscal system can sustain this crisis? Do you think in terms of the short term, or if the crisis goes mid-term or long-term, then how long they can actually sustain this curiosity?
We don't have previous experience given to what happened during the COVID-19 crisis, but we have experienced how to deal with the global finance crisis in 2009. After the crisis, many policy makers and economists they try to the cause of the crisis and what will be a policy response to the future crisis. In that sense, many people they still remember the previous crisis in 2009. The immediate measures that we have to do is actually that's written in the manual. The first one is the lower key interest rate in order to facilitate borrowing from private sectors, and also to provide the massive liquidity to private sector using quantitative easing or the lowering standard of the collateral from central bank to commercial bank. And fiscal measures that just increasing government spending during a short period of time in order to people can consume in a normal way, and that create a demand from government side, which replaces private consumption in a temporary manner. As long as the economic situation gets back to normal, the government reduces its spending and take action for fiscal consolidation. And also from a central bank, they conduct exit strategy to stop their quantitative easing and also going back to normal key interest rate. That's standard answers. But in case of COVID-19 now, this is a demand shock, but it's also a supply shock. For supply shock, it's very hard to provide immediate answers. When there is supply chain disruption between China and Korea, Japan and US, probably the policymaker or the company owner, they have to find the alternative sources to get provided all necessary intermediate. But it takes time. It takes at least 2, 3, 4 months in order to find a new solution. In that sense, for any kind of supply shock, it's very hard to find immediate answers. In that sense, I won't say it's very hard to find a previous experience. And another experience is particularly for Federal Reserve, the U.S. Central Bank, they conducted tapering, and they conducted increasing their key interest rate and reducing quantitative easing from December 2014. Immediately, the country recognized China, and the country is called the fragile five of the country like Brazil, Indonesia, Turkey, South Africa, and those economies they increase the kind of finance supply system because the capital moved from those countries to United States. I think that will happen once again this year or next year. If central bank of different countries do not harmonize their monetary action. Regarding the European solidarity, the problem of COVID-19 is it's not the COVID-19 itself, but COVID-19 just make a kind of the occasion that all weakness at European level it comes out at the same time. The EU and the Euro system and the structural weakness, we know all those weaknesses. But despite of all disadvantage, we have a law to manage EU and create a more European integration. COVID-19 create the unfortunate condition for all those efforts. What we have to do is create solidarity at European level is EU should be more open and more responsible of citizens. One of the main causes of Euroscepticism is actually democratic deficit at the European level. The many policymakers they criticize the democratic deficit, the way of the EU government system, and they don't think the EU operates in a democratic way. During COVID-19, it's more necessary to show that the EU has the willingness and capacity, and also the EU should listen to those people at member state level. And then the next question raised by Mr. John,
So, how long actually endure the
yes,
crisis based on the fiscal implication?
Yes. I think it takes time, at least 5 years. Or 5 years. It's not the question of the pandemic. I mean, they have to reduce their debt level in pre-crisis level, in the level of 2019. But I think it takes at least 5 years. Because it's not possible to spend it immediately within 1 year. It should be the phase out over at least 2 to 5 years. That's why I think
It's kind of a midterm, you think?
yeah, it's right.
Thank you very much also for the time discipline. It was 5 minutes. I really appreciate that. And maybe we should keep that in mind and meet in after 5 years again to assess your today's perspective. I ask you also for 5 minutes statement and answer to the question. Thank you.
So you have to wait for 5 years to be free from one mask. Well, yes. When we have a problem in our society, we have to analyze the problems, and then we have to make the policy, and then we can make the definition or boundaries of a problem to make solution. That is the process of the policies, and then to make the solution, we can make the law. So the making a law is the last stage of the process. So it is very difficult to make the definition by the heads of lawyers. So that is the job for my good friend, Professor Kang, and the other negotiators of the trade lawmakers. I wanted to say that just the starting point of the sketch to make the solution in the field of law. And then my idea was started from the sustainability concept. So it's a long way to go, I know that. But in the yes, with the very positive point of view, I believe that should be a good idea to start the solution from that field. So yes, you have the problem, and then 5 years, and maybe 6 years later, you can make your laws.